I encounter a lot of companies that say that we're customer first, right? We're customer centric. We're all about the customer, but they don't step back and take a look at the interaction that that customer has, especially like first contact or any along the journey, what's going on for that person from their perspective, right? And again, I was listening to some folks on, I think it was on the radio, but talking about there's a lot of ego driven stuff in Silicon Valley, right? And there's a lot of VCs and Stanford and Harvard and all the pedigrees and all the other stuff, right? But what the guy said back to these folks was, you might have the best C-suite in the world, you might have the whatever resumes of the founders, and your customers don't care. They care about their experience with your frontline employees.
And we are back, joined by the amazing Sturdy McKee for another episode of More Clients, Less Effort. Sturdy, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Now, guys, if you don't know Sturdy has spent over 20 years as a physical therapist and private practice owner, growing his San Francisco sport and spine physical therapy up to 6 locations over 45 years, which is an incredible achievement in its own right, and moved into coaching businesses owners full-time since 2016, leveraging his experiences and learning others to grow their business as well. Sturdy's also co-author of The Best Small Business in the World and the author of Nobody's a Mind Reader, which we were just talking about just offline using ChatGPT to kind of help frame that book up. Loves helping entrepreneurs, owners, and founders achieve their personal business goals, which is a very deep passion of mine as well, and lives in the beautiful, beautiful San Francisco, his lovely wife and 3 wonderful children, and the dog who we just met a little bit earlier, Sturdy.
That's right. She's right down here.
Thanks for joining me, mate. Mate, you've got massive wealth of experience, and for a bloke who's only in his late 20s to have 20 years in physical therapy practice, it's fantastic. But tell me where the entrepreneurial or business bug came for you. Because to build almost that's not a single practice, right? We have 6 locations, 45 employees is almost an enterprise in itself. Tell me about that journey. How did you get to that point? Where did you start?
Yeah, that can be a long story in some ways, but I basically realized fairly early on that I wasn't a great employee. I think I'd probably be a better one now than I was when I was young. Yeah, I wasn't ever satisfied. I wasn't ever happy. I kind of knew I was going to do something. I ended up going out and opening my own practice earlier than I thought I would. It was just a situation where the hospital, I was working in an outpatient hospital, and the UCSF and Stanford had merged back then. So if anybody looks up the dates, you will figure out how old I am. But they broke up. There were 2, which looking back was a great lesson in culture and fit, and they're 2 entirely different kind of business and philosophies, cultures around the 2 organizations. But so they demerged, they split up. And when they did, they shut down essentially all the outpatient PT services at UCSF. So I got laid off along with a whole bunch of other people, went out and started interviewing for jobs, really did not like what I was hearing or running into, and started up with a massage table in the basement of a gym, got a cell phone and some cards made at the mall kiosk. And so at least we had a cell phone, but they weren't touch screens back then, right? But this is late 90s, and kind of went out and just started on my own. And it was a couple of years later where this is a solo person. I was doing all right. I was golfing on Tuesdays. Things were pretty decent, but I was walking out to the car, and I remember my hand on the handle, about to go home, thinking, do I want to be doing this in 20 years? It was a kind of a shock to the system. The answer was no. It was a pretty emphatic no. So what do I want to do? I didn't want to become stagnant and just kind of be doing the same thing day in, day out over 20 years. It was helping people, but I started thinking about how can I help more people? And that's the thing that's really kind of driven the journey the entire way. Was went out and got a business partner. We opened another location. We started hiring people in order to take care of more patients, to help more people, right? And as I grew that, one of the things I learned about like the professional service thing was all the advantages of scale. We were here near Silicon Valley and all that kind of stuff. There aren't a lot of advantages to scale. you get bigger, you have bigger problems, bigger cash flow issues, more employees, more moving parts, and still relatively the same profit margin. And it didn't make sense to me at that point to take on a greater and greater complexity, exponentially greater complexity as you continue to grow for basically the same return. And that's the point at which I went, this again is not what I want to be doing in 20 years. So I'm going to stop growing, settle in, eventually exit the practice, all those things. But that kind of drove the transition into doing what I'm doing today, is how can I help others? I didn't want to, be an aggregator and buy up practices, whatever. And I really wanted to empower and help other practice owners. That's kind of where it all started, and other business owners. Because here's the other little dirty secret. I know your clientele is across a bunch of different industries, but the dirty little secret that I learned through EO and through some other groups is that about 80 to 90% of all the things we do in business are the same.
One of the messages I love to get to my clients is that, it doesn't matter what your business is, right? That's what it's,
right.
But we want to reframe it almost to be you're in the business of marketing, right? The thing that you sell. You're not a chiropractor. You're not a physiotherapist or whatever, right? You're a marketing,
or an author or a plumber or
right. Whatever it happens to be, right? That's the thing you sell. That's the thing you do for people. That's how you deliver value, but it's not what your business does. And I find it really interesting that just to sort of pull something out from what you said that I think is a real value bomb for people. We get into this habit, I think, and it sounded like you had a pretty good lifestyle to start with, golf, bit of work, bit of golf, bit of work, family time. But we kind of lose sight of the fact that the business is there to serve us, not us to serve the business, right? And you're absolutely right. If we lose sight of what is the purpose of this business, we can just grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. But, growth is not the same thing as scale. Now, scale creates more opportunity as you become bigger, not relatively the same. And it's interesting, it sort of got to that point where you go, is this thing actually going where I want it to go? Or am I just along for the ride?
Yeah, probably should have figured that out a little bit earlier, but you get, it gets addictive, it gets exciting. You're having some quote unquote success, things are growing. And then, it gets to a point where, at least it got to a point for me where I guess I had three big milestones. Early on was hiring people and trying to get it off the ground and working really long hours and realizing I didn't know the first thing about business, and had to go outside the profession, really start to learn from others and put some things in place. That really was a huge turning point for us at that point in time. Then as like another decade later, I just wrote about this. There was a Monday morning I woke up and I didn't want to go to work. And the worst thing about that was it was my business. Right. And I was sitting there at the edge of the bed going, oh my goodness, if I don't want to go in, what in the world are my staff thinking right now? What's the team thinking? And that just really, really scared me. That was another shock. And that's a point where I reached out to a business coach who happens to be my co-author on The Best Small Business in the World, Matt Fitzsimmons and then Stephen Lynch. They were at Results at the time, and they were both our coaches. And we really rebuilt the culture and made the business into something that we wanted to be involved in. Not everybody, right? There were a couple of people who left along the way, but which is also a normal transition that I didn't really realize. But we made it into something that I like. The key players, the folks that were really bought in and working hard, love to be there. And that was another big milestone in our development, that we could use these tools for whatever we wanted to use them for. The tools are neutral. So do we want to do good things? Do we want to serve more people? Do we want to make a lot of money? And you can do whatever you want with the different tools, but the fact that they're out there and they are learnable was another kind of moment for me, like, oh, we can do what we want. We just have to figure out what it is we need to apply. And there are other people who've done it before.
Yeah, I think that's that big realization that, as you mentioned, all businesses are largely the same, particularly those that have customers, right? There's this journey that we take people on, and at some point we plug in the thing we actually do.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know I've hit resistance. And if somebody's listening to this going, no, mine's unique, mine's precious. We're still all doing the marketing. We're still all doing sales. We're still all, hiring, taking care of people, managing, paying bills, collecting money. All those moving parts are essentially the same. But I'll give credit to Rand Stagen. I had him out to speak with EO Group in San Francisco, and he put a picture of his daughter up the screen, and she was like 16 or 17, but her picture was like when she was 1 year old, right? She's a year old. And he talked about his daughter, and he said, but she's unique and she's precious and, very special to us, but also eminently predictable. When she was going to crawl, when she was going to speak, when there, and with a physio background, right? It was like, oh, all the developmental milestones stuff that you can kind of, things are on track or aren't or whatever. But what he finished with was just like your business. And I kind of went, oh, right. And that's the other thing people kind of lose sight of is you're going to run into these roadblocks at like 10, 25, 50, 100, whatever employees. And it's really a matter of complexity and systems. I know you're a big advocate of systematizing things, but the systems that got you to 10 employees aren't going to get you to 50, right? You've got to revamp and reorganize and rethink what that is, maybe use different tools or sometimes different people, whether that's, your accountant or bookkeeper or attorney or whatever. They work really well with this size organization, and then you might need somebody at a different stage to do different things.
I think that's an important thing to know as your business. At what point do you let your customers go to the next step, or do you just kind of hold on to them forever? All right. And your business will absolutely transition as you build it, as you grow as well, right? The customers you had at the start are not necessarily the customers that you have at the end. They're going to be different people. But I think it is, as you say, it's very important to know at what point do you let your customers go on to the next thing. There's a really cool line in Mad Men season 1, and it says, "The day you win a client is the day you start losing them."
Oh,
Right?
that's a terrible thought.
It is a terrible thought, but it's true, right? It is true. The day you win a client is the day you start losing them, because in a physio practice, at some point that client gets better. Whatever complaint brought them in the first place, you solve their problem and they no longer have that problem. As a business coach, right?
Right.
As an automation specialist like me, you have a problem. We're going to solve that problem for you until such time as you no longer have that problem, and then we're going to release you into the wild again. Hopefully that
go invent new problems.
And if we're doing a good job, yeah, absolutely, we can take you on a journey as well. If we can structure our business right, maybe we've got the next thing that we can help you with after that. But it may not necessarily be you. It may be someone else that you need to sort of hand them on to. And it's an important thing to remember. I'm curious for you. I mean, you mentioned a couple of key sort of, growth milestones. In your experience, what was the most important hire for you in your journey? If you, practice of 45 people, 6 locations, what were some of the most important hires that you had?
Oh, I think it depends on what stage and when, right? I mean, hiring the first therapist was probably the most, well, I don't know. I mean, we hired a front desk person, again, going back to when we didn't know how to hire people and didn't know how to manage people or do any of that stuff, right? The best and worst part about that was they knew that too, right? So looking back at some really good people that I wish we had done a better job for them on their behalf and on all the fronts. But yeah, I think it's the stage, when you're just starting out and you're kind of chief cook and bottle washer, it's that first person that you hire, that you bring in, and they're critical to the next phase, which in our case was hiring another clinician, because other people can treat and start to grow that out. And then, yeah, we did some other stuff that was really, really good. Operations director, we promoted people into clinical directorships. Yeah, I think a lot of it just had to do with the timing, the phase of the company, and what was going to be most impactful at that point in time. The other thing, though, that I thought was really significant that maybe, well, I hope it's counterintuitive because it's a mistake we made. We hired a professional salesperson, and we did that a couple times. The first one wasn't working all that well. We hired another one, still weren't getting the results that we wanted. We wanted somebody, we basically hired them because we assumed they knew how to do it. And I've seen that mistake too with clients, hiring somebody because you don't have a system and expecting them to be the system or to create the system. What ended up happening was we were very good about tracking the results, and we're a little bit frustrated with the results. But what I did was go back and look at the steps, the process, wrote it down. We ended up giving that back to the 6 front desk people, or actually there were more than 6, but 6 locations. So we had 8 or 9 front desk people answering the phones, right? Gave them the process and coached to the process and got a better result than when we had a salesperson. Because I think for a number of reasons, but back to your idea of like, can we create some consistency? Can we figure out what actually works? Can we train people up to do it? And, at intake at the doctor's office, it got as simple as, why do people call, right? I mean, and I asked our team this, like, why do you call your dentist? And they kind of sat there for a minute, like, well, to get an appointment. I'm like, okay, so if you get off the call without an appointment, was that a successful phone call? And they're like, well, no. Like, okay, then if offering the appointment is the most important thing in that phone call, how can we put that first? How can we do that as early in the process as possible? Because everybody, I don't know about you guys, but I think everybody's had the experience of trying to call a doctor or a specialist or somebody, going through all this information, giving them a birth date and, you know, your address and your insurance, if that's the case, or whatever else. And then finding out the first appointments in 3 weeks or 6 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, I know I've had that. We recently bought a new rug for our lounge room after the teenage kids destroyed it, and just destroyed the old one. We thought, okay, we're going to get this one Scotch guarded and protected, and called around a bunch of different, just got onto the yellow pages, I think, online, and called about a bunch of different things. Can't believe I just said the yellow pages, like that's still a thing. We Googled.
Right, I saw that. I heard that. Yeah.
We Googled. I did actually have one turn up on my driveway the other day, and I went, what is this for? Fantastic. I've got something to light my fire with now. But we Googled a bunch of different providers and called a bunch. And the first one we called was like, oh, no, we don't do that anymore. I'm like, well, why are you still advertising this service if you don't do it? And the second one was like, yep. As absolutely as you said, went through a long sort of process and then said, oh, the first available appointment's in 8 weeks. I'm like, oh, thanks very much. That was a waste.
Right.
And the third one we called was like, yep, I can be there the next day. And we're like, oh, brilliant. You've got the business. Right? And then we stopped calling after that. So it is actually, I think, you're really coming back to what is the fundamental purpose and how that we need for that particular, and how can I systemize that in a way that it happens all the time?
Right.
What's my process? Okay. So you had your questionnaire, and it's just a case of taking that questionnaire and saying, hey, look, we've got the next available appointment here. Does that work for you? Yes. Fantastic. Now we go and grab the rest of the details that we need to sort of book that in.
Exactly.
Simple, some of the really simple things that we can do, from a client perspective, to go, well, what's the outcome I need from this particular step? I see with social media a lot. We go, what's the purpose of social media? Is social media there to get likes and engagements and stuff? No, it's literally there to get people to do. And so if your social media, well, all the resources you are spending on it, time and money to do it, if it is not doing that thing, it is not getting you to the next goal.
Right. Absolutely.
This stuff you can measure.
Yeah. And I love that you immediately got it on the customer experience side of things, because I encounter a lot of companies that say that we're customer first, right? We're customer centric. We're all about the customer, but they don't step back and take a look at the interaction that customer has, especially like first contact or any along the journey, what's going on for that person from their perspective, right? And again, I was listening to some folks on, I think it was on the radio, but talking about there's a lot of ego-driven stuff in Silicon Valley, right? And there's a lot of VCs and Stanford and Harvard and all the pedigrees and all the other stuff, right? But what the guy said back to these folks was, you might have the best C-suite in the world, you might have the whatever resumes of the founders, and your customers don't care. They care about their experience with your frontline employees.
Now, I think we lose sight of the fact how critically important employees are, and then giving them the opportunity to succeed. And I love that you pulled out, those two professional salespeople. I think there are a lot of founders out there who hate the idea of sales, right? The idea of sort of being confrontational and actually asking people for money is terrifying. I'd love to help, but I don't want to have to ask for money to do that, because it suddenly, I don't know, cheapens what it is that we do, rather than just the exchange of value it is. But, we look at those two employees, it may not have been necessarily that they were the wrong people, but did I give them the tools that they needed to succeed? And that same rule applies, I think, for any person in your business. You get someone you think might be good, but if you don't give them the tools they need to succeed, and then get the hell out of the way, as you said, you've just got more overhead and more pain points and more problems than you did otherwise.
Right. I love bringing it back to sports, and I know you guys don't have a lot of baseball.
We do have some baseball in Australia.
A little bit. But yeah, if you've ever been to a little league game, or you can apply this to essentially any sport, right? But the coach's job is to empower the players to be the best they can be, and then put them in the right position. And if you were at a little league game and you were watching the coach run around middle infield fielding balls and making plays, what would you as a parent or observer think of that coach, right? And then you start thinking about, well, what would those players think, right? Am I good enough? Why is he here? Why am I not doing my job? And then one of the questions I like to ask clients is, are you that coach? Because in some cases, yeah, they're running around middle infield when you have players that want to do the job. They know what the job is. Get out of the way. You're exactly right.
What's a system? I want to pivot here a little bit. What's a system that you use now in your coaching business, maybe from lessons learned in running a practice?
Oh, I know your focus is on marketing, and I think the marketing client acquisition piece, it went all over the place for me for a while. It's interesting in my head anyway, like going to a different context, how you can erroneously assume, I don't know, again, kind of that sales thing, right? I didn't want to sell. I didn't want to. Well, when approaching that whole process from really the same perspective we had as clinical, as a clinician, and hiring and training and teaching clinicians, can I help? Is this something I can do? Is this the best, most efficient way for the client to get where they want to go? And if it is, tell them, show them the plan, and then here's my big hairy close. Would you like me to help you with that?
Yeah,
Right.
really simple one, isn't it? It's just the sales
Right.
process.
But
This is what we
yeah,
do. This is our process. Do you want,
well, this is
my
where
help?
you are. This
Yeah.
is where you want to get to. This is how, let's connect the dots. And ultimately, it's funny, like we act like we're giving them a choice. They have the choice, right? Here's the plan. Here's how you get there. You can use my help or you can go do it yourself. They're going to make that choice anyway. So just asking, hey, so this is how I would lay it out. What do you think? Why would that work? Why would that not work? Kind of get those objections out of the way. And then, would you like me to help you? And they might go, no, not right now. Okay. Right. I'm not going to chase you down. I mean, it's a partnership. If you don't want my help, I'm not going to try to force you to take my help. Right.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know, Tim, why it took me that so long to figure out that it's the same thing I was doing in the clinic. Right. Here's where you are. Here's where you want to get to. Here's how we're going to get there. Would you like my help?
Yeah. But even that simple process, I think, is such a critical one that people sort of lose sight of. They kind of get
Oh,
up
I
with
did.
oh my God,
Try
the
to make it
sales
too
process.
complicated.
It's too complicated, right? But you're right. You just
Right.
bringing things back to the simple, some simple foundations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then doing that over and over and over again, and then measuring the results, gets us to where we want to go. That's some absolute value bombs, Sturdy, and I really appreciate you sharing some of those stories. We're going to pivot again. I like to take out every podcast with a little bit of quick fire to learn more about you. So let's go with this one. I know you work from home. Tell me, what are the pros and cons of having a home office?
Oh, I don't actually have a home office. Well, sometimes I work from home a lot at the dining room table, and I've got 3 teenagers and a dog. So when I don't have to be on something like this or recording or with clients, I will do a bunch of work from home. It's just easy. It's convenient, right? It's hanging out with the kids too, the flexibility. But no, I have a small office about 9 or 10 blocks away from where I live that I'm in right now. That it's quiet and
Nice.
just the dog and me.
What's one insult you've received that you're really proud of?
An insult that I'm proud. I don't know if it's an insult exactly, but I think it was intended as such, right? That somebody was an interview, I think, where it was like, you're really aggressive. What I came to learn is like my affect, my face, I look when I'm thinking, I
Stern.
get my eyebrows and I look like, for whatever it's worth, I look like I was at January 6th, right? And the kids tease me all the time about it, but it's like, yeah, no, but being aggressive. And I'm like, you know what? That's not a bad thing, right? It depends on the context and all, but I'm like, that sometimes that can serve you. Okay, I'm all right with that.
Take it. You've only got one head. You may as well use it, right?
Right.
I know you've got three kids. What's one thing that you would love that your kids would learn from your business experience?
But they can do whatever they want. I think that was really a big part of the impetus behind writing this book. Was I was stuck for a few years. I was trying to write the book and not really making headway, and had been given advice about writing the stories, and then offer the advice and the technical stuff, and basically the same format as every other business book out there. And I'm like, that's not what I want to do. I want to create a how-to manual for my kids, and that's essentially what we did with this one. And that, again, the principles are all the same. The best small business in the world is the way it is because you can plug in whatever service or product or whatever it is that you're offering, because all this other infrastructure stuff, customer journey, vision, KPIs, accountabilities, marketing, target customer, it's all the same. They're all old enough at this point where I think they get that I just want them to go do what they want to do, be happy with their choices and build something. And I think they all kind of they're getting it. They see that there are different possibilities. A lot of stuff that when I was younger, when I was a teenager, I didn't know. The things that I thought I wanted to do or be were basically things I had contact with, things I had seen, and didn't even know what an entrepreneur was when I graduated high school, much less how to spell it. Right. I didn't know how to spell it till I was one. But anyway.
Awesome. No, I love that. And, so much of what we do is about creating a legacy for future generations as well. And I'm the same with my son as well. I'd love to sort of see him succeed in whatever he wants to do, but show him that they're absolutely right. Anything is possible if he puts his mind to it. Lastly, where can listeners find you online?
Sturdycoaching.com, Sturdy McKee. I mean, you can look me up. I'm not hard to find. LinkedIn, TikTok, you name it. It's all out there. But yeah, not too difficult to track down. Just make sure you're not getting my son.
There we go. Fantastic, man. Thanks very much. Really appreciate you joining us on today's podcast. And guys, thanks for listening to another episode of More Clients, Less Effort. Sturdy shared some fantastic value bombs today. And I know I'm going to be pulling some of those out to implement in my own business as well. Sturdy, thanks again for joining us. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks. I hope it was helpful.
Okay, guys. We'll see you next episode on More Clients, Less Effort.